Hey, everybody. Today, I'm asking if you like this show, would you head over to iTunes and leave a review? Just go to coolcatteacher.com/iTunes, and it will take you to the show on iTunes. And you can give it stars, or even better, if you leave a rating. It really does make a difference, and it helps other teachers find the show. Thanks. 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom, Episode 320. The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today. Today, we're talking with Gerald Aungst, 28-year educator, about 5 principles of the modern mathematics classroom. So, Gerald, where do we start? What's our first?
So the first principle is conjecture, and that's basically the idea that when you're looking at math problems, you want students to be able to wonder and to pursue their curiosity and to be able to ask really good questions. It's not just about being able to solve the equations that you throw in front of them.
So ask good questions. Do you think some math teachers are kind of not used to good questions and they just want kids to learn it?
They definitely are. I think, my own experience as a student, even though I loved math and I was really good at it, I felt like the emphasis was on, follow these procedures and just learn the algorithms and get the right answer in the end. And someday you'll figure out why it matters and how it works and all of that stuff. And I really think we need to start thinking about the why much sooner.
Yes, and letting them ask those questions. Okay, what's our second?
So the second principle is about communication. The idea there is that students need to understand what they're doing, and a good way to know if they understand what they're doing is if they can explain it, they can speak about it, and they can communicate about it in good math language.
Well, does this mean have presentations in math class?
It could. It also means having debates and arguments and conversations more than just a lot of pencil and paper activities.
Wow. So what would a debate look like in math class? What would you be debating?
One of the strategies that I like to talk about is, I call it convince me. The first stage of that is a student being able to convince themselves that a solution is a good solution, but then the next step is to be able to explain it to somebody else, explain it to maybe a friend who knows them really well. And then the last stage is really being able to explain it to someone who is actively trying to pick apart their reasoning and their logic.
Now, Gerald, we do want to tell our listeners that you have a lot more detail in your book, right? 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom.
Absolutely. This is a really, really quick overview.
So what's our third?
The third principle is collaboration. We tend to think of math as a solitary activity, as something that kids should do by themselves, that working together is not a good thing. But in the real world problem solving is almost always done together, and it's almost always done collaboratively. So I think we need to teach them how to do that.
Give me an example of what this would look like besides just sitting around in a circle and kind of working problems together.
So an activity that I like to do is to give kids a box of stuff, maybe some random objects or just maybe some selected things that I've specifically chosen, and ask them, okay, work together with your group, pick two objects out of the box, and then create a math problem that uses those objects. So that gets them talking to each other. It gets them working together to think about how you can construct a problem. And then I would hand that problem off to another group who might then work together to try and solve it and come up with it. And they would get together with the group that created it and talk about what they noticed, talk about what they solved. Obviously, it connects a lot of that communication piece, but it's really about working together and sharing ideas.
Yeah, because if you really want to understand math, it's not just about finding the answer. If you can write a really good question, then you might actually understand it even better, huh?
Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, what's our fourth?
Fourth principle is kind of a non-intuitive one. I call it chaos. When you first hear that, you think we don't want a chaotic math classroom, right? But the idea here is that we try to make math neat and clean and straightforward so that students don't have to think. The reality is that when you're trying to solve a problem in the real world, it's very unlikely that somebody else can hand you the algorithm that's going to work. You have to figure those out yourself. So letting students kind of spend some time in the mess and spend some time struggling. We want productive struggle, but spend some time struggling and thinking and working on things and trying to figure things out is going to be much better for them in the long run, and they're going to learn a lot more about the math that way.
Okay, give me an example of what this looks like in the classroom, just that you let them have that productive struggle for a little bit longer, or is there another example?
There's a type of problem that I like to use. I call them I wonders. I didn't invent them, but they're really good for this kind of chaotic problem solving. Here's an example. If we filled Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia completely with popcorn, how long would it take the Phillies to eat all of it? What I like about problems like that is, when kids come to me and say, I don't know what the answer is, what is it? I say, I have no idea what it is either. And it's an honest answer because I really don't know the answer. It requires them doing a lot of estimating and a lot of reasoning, possibly even some research. When I threw this question at a group of fourth graders once, and they immediately wanted to go do some research about how fast do people eat. So it takes kids off in interesting directions that you might not even anticipate. The mess of it allows them to do some really deep reasoning that they might not do otherwise.
Well, that's kind of mind-blowing. Okay, what's our fifth?
The fifth principle is celebration. And it's not the kind of celebration where, everybody gets a trophy and we pat everybody on the back, but it's more about celebrating effort, growth mindset, making sure that we recognize the value of mistakes. Learning happens when you make a mistake and then you figure out what you did wrong. Less learning happens if you get everything right all the time. So it's really about celebrating when that learning takes place and recognizing when that learning takes place.
And celebration is just so important in every single classroom. What do you think is the biggest mistake in the modern math classroom that you wish you could kind of help teachers get past?
I think the biggest mistake that I see and that I have seen is teachers who believe that math is about that linear progression from you get a problem, you work the algorithm, you get an answer, and then you just continue to repeat that. If more teachers understood that math was really the language of problem solving and that it's about the problem solving process, I think we would have a lot better math instruction going on.
So Gerald, you've been teaching 28 years. If you could travel back and talk to Gerald, the first year teacher, what would you tell him about being a great math teacher faster?
I think the first thing I would say is put down the teacher's edition of the textbook. Give a lot more examples to kids of really rich, really interesting, really deep problems that take more than a minute or two to solve. Problems that you might spend an entire class on one problem or even an entire week on one problem. Be willing to take the time to dig into some really significant problems and spend some time on them.
Oh, wow. That sounds kind of intimidating. Sounds like folks are going to have to get the book, 5 Principles of the Modern Mathematics Classroom. Remarkable Educators, it's all about making it meaningful, no matter what we're teaching. Conjecture, communication, collaboration, a little bit of chaos, and a whole lot of celebration are things that we can use in every single classroom, in every single subject. So thank you, Gerald, for these fantastic principles that really all of us can apply. As I said before the show started, it really does help if you leave a review. So if you go to coolcatteacher.com/iTunes and leave a review, I really do appreciate it. And I also appreciate it when you tell your friends. One tip, a lot of people don't know that if you go to the show notes for any of these episodes, so today is episode 254, so you would go to coolcatteacher.com/e254. And you can go to the show notes. But if you look at the little player that I've embedded, there are 2 little brackets. And if you click that, you can actually embed any show you want on your own blog, your own website. You can share the links to those and just share it far and wide. You can even download a copy of the show if you want to send it to others. So I've put it out there for you, and I hope it's useful. Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.